Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio.
Today's guest is Kimberly Spencer, a high-performance life coach for entrepreneurs and the founder and CEO of Crown Yourself. Another great actionable conversation with a practicing coach, this time a life coach who works with people like us, entrepreneurs facing challenges mostly in our own minds and belief systems that hold us from rising to our full potential. One of the conversations we had during this interview is around the perpetual search for clients. Are they out there? Well, of course they are. It's not that they aren't there, but that you might not be primed to see them. To get the clients you want in your roster, you need to be the kind of person who's willing to become aware of who and where your clients are, which sounds hard and confusing. But these are the kind of important mental shifts Kimberly helps her clients make. So stay tuned to learn more from her. Our show sponsors Primal Health Coach Institute, an NBHWC approved health coaching school, which means that our graduates can qualify to sit for the national board exam to become a board certified health coach. You can learn more about our Master Coach certification track at primalhealthcoach.com/master coach. And while you're on our website, navigate over to primalhealthcoach.com/primal pro and learn all about the Done For You 12-week app-based health coaching program we've put together so that certified health coaches can hit the ground running with an effective and transformational health coaching program right out of the gate. We know that developing program materials and sourcing a client management solution are two of the most show-stopping hurdles in new coaches getting started, so we made Primal Pro for you. Check it out at primalhealthcoach.com/primal pro. As you're listening to our episode, please make sure to screen grab your podcast player and tag us in your Instagram stories at Health Coach Radio. And as always, the show notes for this episode and all previous episodes can be found at primalhealthcoach.com/radio. Let's get on with the show. Please welcome our guest, certified high-performance coach, best-selling writer, health junkie, freedom lover, wife, mama, and unsinkable optimist, Kimberly Spencer.
All right, Kimberly Spencer, how are you today?
I'm doing extraordinary. How are you?
Oh, we're doing great. We're excited to talk to you. We were chatting a little bit before we hit record, so there's lots of places we can go with this conversation. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So tell our audience a little bit about you. Give us like the 3 to 5 minute backstory on kind of where you started, wherever you want to start your story's fine, and kind of how you got to here.
Yeah. So I started out as a Pilates instructor and a screenwriter, actually, because I was working in Hollywood and that was always my dream. But after battling a 10-year battle with bulimia, I found that Pilates was the one form of exercise that actually made me physically, for the first time in my life, feel good in my body. And so I taught Pilates for 12 years, I believe. I started when I was 19, and it was through teaching that I actually started to heal my own relationship with my body and be put in a leadership position. And from there, I went on to start my own private Pilates studio. And then through that opportunity, I grew to become the president of an e-commerce company. And we took a back stretching device to market. Initially, they wanted me to come on just as a consultant. And when I saw the value of the product and how I thought it could be used, I said, I don't just want to be a consultant. I want to be a partner. And so I went all in with that for 2 years. And then at 2 years of going all in and, seeing our product on the big billboards at Times Square and pitching it to the first round of Shark Tank auditions and taking it to market, like going through that whole experience. After 2 years, my business partner told me he wanted to buy me out, and it devastated me. Mm-hmm. And that was 3 months before I was supposed to get married. And so we signed the buyout agreement 3 weeks before I got married. And then I flew off onto my honeymoon and with my husband, and I was like, what do I do when I get back? And I loved the body, but I found that Pilates never completely fulfilled me. And I'd had success in screenwriting. I got my first feature film produced and distributed through Lionsgate, and it's on Netflix. And when I was at that the premiere, I found that I was only 90% fulfilled as well, until 2 weeks after that film premiered. I got a text from a friend of mine whose son had come to the film premiere, and he had changed his life based on that story. And I had changed my own story and my own life based on the story that I was telling myself with bulimia and with my body image. And as I'm there sitting there on my honeymoon, I was thinking, well, I love the body. I love fitness. I love writing. I love film. I love production. I love relationships. I love business and being an entrepreneur. And after way too many espressos, I leaped off the couch and I said, crown yourself. And my husband's like, what's that? I said, I don't know what that is. It's the name of my company, though. And and so for a year and a half, I went all in into building my business. However, I was doing what I tell my clients not to do, which is what I call productive procrastination, where I was doing all the things that made a business look good, getting a domain name, doing the photo shoots, building a brand. And yet for a year and a half, my business made $0. And that was because I was avoiding the one thing that terrified me most, which was rejection and putting myself out there and standing out, and sales. And once I found out I was pregnant, I said, enough's enough. And this is either like it's got to grow or die moment. And I said, I'm choosing for it to grow, because if I'm going to teach my son that he can be anything that he wants to be, I better damn well be living that. And so I went off and got my first business coach. I got my first certifications in NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnosis, because I knew that the business blockages that I had were all mindset. I knew they were similar to the ones that I had experienced with bulimia. I just knew I also had a 9-month deadline to figure my stuff out, and didn't have like the luxury of having lots of time before my business started making money. And so fortunately, once I went through that process, I started selling, and actually having a legitimate business, and then growing from there. And we literally just got back from Australia 2 weeks ago, and supporting my family and literally living our dream amidst a global pandemic on the beautiful Gold Coast in Queensland, where we got to live 2 blocks away from the beach. And the fact that my business was able to support my family through that was amazing.
Ooh, my
Wow.
goodness. What I like about your story, and honestly, on a personal level, I can relate to, is that you have this smattering of like skills and gifts. So things like screenwriting, things like, maybe business development stuff, the body. And when you got to that now what do I do moment in life, where it's like you just sort of inventoried everything that you're good at and said, how can I put this all together and make something? This is sort of like inventorying your strengths, or we talked to Dr. John Berardi, your, what do you call it, your unique abilities.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And we all have a cocktail of those. And I think that a lot of people go to business thinking, I don't know enough about anything to start a business, but we do. We all know enough about something to start something.
Yeah, and with building a business, I think one of the things that makes it so complex is there seems like there's always a new marketing initiative or new thing or new tactic that you can do. Should I do webinars? Should I do, this? Should I, do 5-day challenges? And so there's always a new marketing thing that can make business seem more complicated than it actually is. And what business simply is, it's building relationships. And it's cultivating those connections and building those relationships, and then seeing where those relationships go from there. Maybe some turn into clients, maybe some turn into referrals, maybe some turn into just the cheerleaders and champions of your business who love your content and love what you produce. And they're the ones who are avidly commenting, but they'll never buy a thing from you because for whatever reason. But just building those relationships, and that is really the thing that I think so many people, I was going to make up a word, complexify in, in essence, of just making things seem more complicated than they really are. And I mean, because humans, we all are humans at the end of the day, and we all buy into ideas, concepts, products, services based on people that we know, like, and trust.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, first of all, we can human beings can complicate the hell out of anything,
We're
right?
so good at that, right?
We're great at it, but we can also, when in a position of having no choice, we can really get good at simplifying it down to one thing.
Mhm.
And focusing on that and kind of moving it forward. And you know what? That's when shit happens. That's when stuff kind of actually starts to move. And this is what we do as coaches. If you really think about it from a health coaching perspective, one of the number one reasons a lot of my clients are unsuccessful, even though they're working hard, is because they're trying to do too many things at once. Right? Instead of learning how to kind of, to use a term that both of you use, kind of inventory, what do I have? What do I need to, for all of these things, and really kind of focusing on the next step that's actually going to kind of move the needle,
And
you
really
know?
the only two things that move the needle for a business are client generation and client satisfaction. So if you look at if you just do those two things every day of asking yourself, how can I generate more clients and how can I satisfy and add more value to the clients that I actually have? Because you're 60 to 70% more likely to convert or reconvert or have a past customer buy from you than you are to find a new customer that takes you're 20 to 30% likely to convert a new customer, but 60 to 70%, like I'll take those odds. So going back, how can you add more value? How can you be of even greater service? What new things could surprise and delight your existing or past customers that they actually need for where they are now?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me, so what is Crown Yourself? So how do you go from, you know, bulimia and all the stories
Mhm.
that go around in your head, having suffered from that, emerge from there, screenwriting, like, so we have this screenwriting thing, which I think if somebody comes from a lot of internal plays and a lot of stories, you get pretty good at being able to communicate, at least with yourself, and then transferring that to other people. But how do you go from getting that bought out and then crown yourself? So what was going on in your head at that point when you were like, okay, the story that I've been telling in my own head around this bulimia and how it defines me, to being able, so we skipped a lot in that story because I asked you to kind of make it 3 to 5 minutes.
You said 3 to 5 minutes. Like,
To be completely fair. So now let's kind of unpack it a little bit.
yeah.
I would love, we can take, I would love to address both, like, because look, as health coaches, and many of us work with folks that have issues around food. I don't care whether it's, anorexia, bulimia, but just a bad relationship with food and body image and all of this stuff. Did you have help with that and unpacking that? Like, how did you emerge from that to launch something like Crown Yourself, which sounds like a super empowering, you got this girl kind of business?
Yeah, so I've always been obsessed with princesses and the stories of but I never liked the wimpy princesses, to be honest. Like I never liked Sleeping Beauty or Snow White where they just had to be kissed by a dude or lose a shoe to actually achieve something. Like I like the women who had to go and face a challenge to rise into who they were becoming. And if you think about the metaphor of a queen, when a queen is a princess, she is being groomed from the moment that she is born to lead. And yet, so often in our own lives and with our own dreams, we are being conditioned by our present environment. And if our environment that we've been raised in, whether it's our parents or our friends or society or whatnot, that says, oh, you shouldn't dream so big, or you shouldn't, who are you to think that, or who are you to make that much money, or, all the other sorts of limiting beliefs that come along with it, that's what keeps us locked in these tiny little peasant mediocre boxes versus a queen who is being groomed from the moment that she is born to lead, to be a leader. And that's what Crown Yourself really stands for, is cultivating servant leaders, because I think the best rulers are not the dictators of the world, but they're the ones who lead consciously, who are of service, who see life and experiences as happening for them, not happening to them, who are looking at everything that they are experiencing in their life and transmuting that into being something that could be for the greater good of all human beings, of everybody that they serve. And so for me, that was really what Crown Yourself was, and what stopped me mostly beyond the tactile, not the doing of like actually not putting myself out there and making sales for that year and a half that I was making no money in my business. But what stopped me really was because I wasn't embodying the qualities of leadership and the values that I was saying that Crown Yourself really stood for. So Crown Yourself really stands for ownership. It stands for growth. It stands for authenticity. I was hiring stylists back then to try to create a brand that I actually wasn't being in my real life. Like in my real life, I was struggling with like waking up and just kind of like going through the motions of getting in my workout clothes and just kind of living in that all day and not really embodying that queenly version of me. And that's really what I learned through bulimia and that whole journey of 10 years from when I was 12 to when I was 22 was learning to embody what does it mean to be a leader. Like once when I first started teaching Pilates, I still was in the process of recovery, and I'd started rewriting my stories, and I'd started shifting my environment. And the beautiful thing was I went from uh, being in an environment where I grew up, which was in a home with an addict, which is what taught me similar conditioning patterns of escapism, suppression, and repression of emotions, which is how I just my vehicle was bulimia. My father's was alcohol and addiction and opioids. But I escaped through my feelings of these big emotions that I would have by suppressing and repressing them, and then suddenly they would, explode. And my behavior modeled that. Well, as I was searching for a better way, I started questioning my own stories of what I was telling myself. I had to take radical ownership of the fact that it was never my father shoving my finger down my throat. It was me. And I had to take ownership of that. And the same value mirrored itself when I first started Crown Yourself, because I didn't take ownership for a year and a half in my business of it not making money. I was still blaming my former business partner for my own financial struggles and for the struggles of where I was with growing the business and all the limiting beliefs that I had created and the stories that I'd created because of that. And so in both cases, I had to banish blame. I had to eliminate the blame and take full radical responsibility for my actions, my behaviors, my thoughts, my emotions. And not from a place of judgment either, from a place of compassionate curiosity of saying, okay, I'm seeing this thought pattern, I'm seeing this old story repeat itself. What new story could I tell that perhaps would actually produce a different result? And I started examining the cause and effect of things rather than being at the effect, being at the reaction, being at the inside the sea of the tumult of my emotions and kind of just being at the mercy of the waves. I chose to look at, like, okay, let's look at the cause of this. What is actually causing this hurricane that I'm just feeling drowned by, whether it was in bulimia or with building a business. And when I looked at what those actions were, it was all my own stories. It was all the stories that I'd built up in my head about my body, about my image, about my self-worth. The same was true when I was starting my business, about my body, about my image and my self-worth. And so when I started embodying what it was to be, what I felt it was to be an authentic leader, the values that I was purporting to espouse in my business, that was when I started to change. And that was when my business started to change. And that was when my body started to change with bulimia, because I actually started leaning into and living these values. And I learned that very quickly with teaching Pilates, because suddenly I had a process that I knew worked. I knew Pilates worked because I saw the physiological changes, and I felt the physiological the physiological changes in my body. Like I felt the 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 rest, the digest, the fact that Pilates, like yoga and qigong and other forms of um slower, more breath centered exercises, it helped activate my parasympathetic nervous system, which, growing up in a home with an addict, like everything was reactionary, everything was fight, flight, freeze. And I was finally able to curate oscillation in my body. And the same was true in my business when I was starting to get overwhelmed with things, and I was in that reactionary position of constantly like, oh my gosh, my bank account is so low, and oh my gosh, I have my clients coming to the end of her package, and like I was constantly reacting versus, okay, let's be proactive, take a breath, settle, and look at things from a vision standpoint of where I want to be, not just running away from what I don't want to have.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's a big one for a lot of our clients, right, Erin? Like running
Mhm.
away from what they
Yeah.
don't want rather than learning to move towards what
Right.
you want from a mindset point of view.
Right. Some of the language that you're using when you were sharing that story was this idea of taking ownership, leadership, banishing blame, non-judgmentally. Um, I feel like those are very actionable concepts. Do you know what I mean? So whatever if you don't know how to design a logo, whatever if you don't know how to set up an online schedule, or you're not techie, or you're not this, or you're not that, we all have leadership potential in us, and we
Mhm.
all can take ownership. And there's this, and I don't want to sound disparaging, but I do see, because we were speaking before we started recording, that Laura and I train and mentor health coaches.
Yeah.
So we see them taking their, tentative first steps into business and just immediately like, well, this isn't working because I don't know. Nobody's out there. Nobody's listening to me. I don't have the right stuff. Oh, well. And there's like, that's not a leadership vibe. Like step into this like a leader and take the bull by the horns. So we're sharing a lot of, I guess, what I don't want us to accidentally do here is just share platitudes back and forth, like take the
Agreed.
bull by the horns.
Agreed.
So from an actionable perspective, one thing that you said that I jotted down was, what story can I tell that creates a different outcome? So now we hear this talk about stories a lot from life coaches and folks like that. And I think it's nebulous for some people. What do you mean the stories? Like, so can you give an example of like maybe a really basic generic example of a story that an entrepreneur tells themselves that's holding them back, and how they might rewrite that story? Do you have an anecdote from your client practice that you can
Yeah.
share that might shed light?
Yeah. So a simple one, the most common one is I don't have clients. Like, where do I find clients? Where do I find these
Number
magical
one question I
people
get.
that like, I don't have clients. And so we'll go from a subconscious level and then move it into like conscious tactile action. On a subconscious level, when you're reinforcing, I don't have clients, where are my clients? Like that you're not on the actual frequency where your clients are actually at. And so you're stuck in the story of I don't have clients, and that is a story. Now a lot of people believe their story because they're like, wait, it's actually not here. Now I don't have this with a health coach client, but I do have this with a real estate client. And I had a real estate client who was desperately searching for an investor for her property, and she came to me and she was like, Kim, I will do anything, like shift my subconscious, what needs to change because I don't have an investor. And I said, okay. And I said, we examined her strategy, we examined what she was doing. And as I was listening to her language, I constantly kept hearing her reinforce the belief, the story, I don't have an investor. And I said, well, considering that, I said, you are constantly telling yourself that story of I don't have an investor, I don't have an investor. So what it's doing is it's basically putting on subconscious blinders to the conscious possibility that there are investors out there for you. And I said, let me ask you, do you believe that there are investors out there? Do you believe that there is somebody out there that this property is a great deal? Do you believe you have something of value to offer? Yeah, of course I do. Do you believe that that there is somebody out there who would like, this is an absolute no-brainer to work with you? Yeah, of course I do. I said, great. So then out there in the ether, I said, do you know all of the 7 billion people on this planet? And she's like, no. And I said, so how do you know that you don't have an investor? Have you spoken to all? And she's like, no, because that's ridiculous, right? We haven't spoken to 7 billion people on the planet out of all the people that could possibly invest or become a client. And I said, so what if instead we just shifted your language and we shifted the story to, I have an investor? And she's like, but Kim, I know that's not true. I don't physically have an investor. There's no one on that contract. And I said, what if we just shifted the language in a way that you have an investor, you're just not consciously aware of who that person is? And what if we also shift? And she said, well, I understand that I'm not consciously aware. She said, okay, because consciously in the collective consciousness of all our subconscious minds, there is that intuition, that possibility, that connection, that interconnectedness of the universe that there is somebody out there if we have something of value to offer. And so I said, what if instead you started telling yourself a story of, I have an investor, this property is so amazing, I have an investor, I'm just fully willing to become consciously aware of who they are. And so she started telling herself this news story, literally on just a subconscious level. So every time she would catch herself saying, I don't have an investor, she would shift her language to saying, I have an investor. I am willing to become consciously aware of who they are. And so what that did was it started to bring to her ideas of people that she could reach out to. Suddenly her subconscious mind, because your subconscious mind, a prime directive of your subconscious mind is that it wants to please you. It wants to find that answer. So it will seek out the answer to the question that you're asking. Well, if you're asking the question, or if you're repeating the statement or the story that I don't have a client, it's going to continuously reinforce and give you the answers and give you the evidence that you don't have clients or an investor, like my client experienced. But if you shift that language, if you allow the subconscious mind to get to work on making all those new connections, then it'll start looking for who could that person be, who could be an investor, a referral, a possibility. And so what happened was, in 2 weeks, my client ended up getting her investor.
Wow.
She shifted her language. She started shifting that story that she was telling herself, that she was willing to become consciously aware. And suddenly her subconscious mind went to work at finding new connections, new people, reaching out. Oh, I could reach out to this person. Oh, I could reach out to oh, I haven't asked that person yet if they had a referral. Oh, this person. So suddenly something would spark in her subconscious mind whenever she would be in conversation with someone. And it came with such ease and grace. But because she shifted her story around how she was communicating with herself, because and that's one of the most powerful ways that we can start shifting our story, is you start shifting to being on the frequency in the vibration, because we're all frequency and vibration, shifting into that status of, I have that person, I have that client, I just am willing to become consciously aware. The only thing needed for change is willingness. And you know this as a health coach, the only, like, you cannot change someone who is unwilling to change their habits. But if they are willing,
Yeah.
if they're just willing and open and like, okay, maybe, okay, let's test it, okay, let's try, let's see, that's somebody who is actually in a receptive state to receive something new, whether it's in
Yeah.
health coaching or new clients.
Cool. Yeah. It brings to mind the reticular activating system, that subconscious part of the mind. So this is just a little anecdote, but I just bought a new car. Well, actually, Laura and I both just bought new cars, and we both actually just bought black Jeeps. But anyways, I from the period of time that I made the deposit on this car and when I went to go get it, I saw black Jeeps everywhere. Everywhere I looked, I was like, man, black Jeeps are the most common vehicle on the road, only because I had just allowed myself to become aware of them. So what I love that you said is, and this is how I interpreted it when you're talking about your real estate friend. It's like, look, there are investors out there. Of course there are. There are people out there buying and investing in properties. Yes, there are. This is a great property. That is a point of fact. Like, there are facts here. Yes, there are clients. There are people buying health coaching all over the place. But to your point, it's like, if you have to become open or aware of them, and then you'll see them everywhere, kind of like the black Jeeps.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not quite that simple, but as long as, if you're not thinking about black Jeeps, you won't see a black Jeep. You know what I mean? Like,
And
you'll
look,
never notice a black Jeep.
and it is that reticular activating system of what you focus on, you feed. So if you're focusing on the story of, I don't have clients, I don't have clients, then you're feeding that story. You're continuously feeding that part of your brain, versus, I have clients and I'm willing to become consciously aware of who they are. Suddenly you'll start seeing them everywhere. You'll start seeing possibilities everywhere, and then you can extend an invitation or reach out with a tip or a help. And somebody, like, I've gotten so many clients from just saying, hey, I noticed you were struggling with this, and hey, how about we just have a conversation?
Mhm.
And just looking to come from that place of service, not like, I'm going to convert you, because nobody likes that sort of evangelical approach to business, I think, versus reaching out to be of service and noticing that someone has a problem and somebody has a pain point, and that maybe perhaps they would like to alleviate that pain point.
Mhm. And you have the solution.
Hallelujah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we teach that in our program all the time. Like, if you can't solve a problem, you don't have a business, right? And you
Yeah.
need to be able to articulate what that problem is, and you need to be able to tell it from the client. So your niche, or the person that you, at the end of the day, really envision yourself serving, telling it through their eyes, so to speak, and embodying it to a certain degree. And when you were telling when I had asked you that very long, elaborate story about how crown yourself, what popped into my head was, you created a vessel there. It sounds to me, you had this, what am I going to do next? And ruminated over it. And I think it sounds to me like you knew what you wanted and created a vessel for it, but you needed to get, you need to add stuff to the vessel, right?
Oh, I had to like become captain of the ship. Like you can be building the vessel, but it ain't going anywhere unless you have a captain. And so
Right.
that's where the leadership comes into play is like if you're not embodying being that captain and if you're thinking that you're gonna go along for a passenger cruise, that ain't it. Like that is not it when you're building a business. Like you can build the vessel. You can have all the lovely marketing materials and the great Instagram, and you can even have the tons and tons of thousands of followers. I mean, I've worked with clients who have way more followers than I do, and yet they're not making nearly as much as they could be, because of the fact that they aren't commanding from the business standpoint that sales perspective. And that I think sales is something that scares a lot of people, especially good-hearted people. I've noticed, especially in the health coaching community, where they got into this a lot of times. And tell me if I'm wrong. Like they got into this because they want to serve, because they see the problem and they have such a big heart for it, and they so want to help people. And sometimes then the perceptions of sales and selling, it's like, oh, but I'm taking money from them, and I'm like, well, what are you actually giving them?
Right.
How are you serving them? Because and what I say, especially when I get that comment with sales specifically of like, oh, I don't feel like it's right to sell to them, or I feel sleazy if I'm selling. And I'm like, well, tell me about that really memorable free goodie bag that you got back when we all used to go to like live events. And like, I mean, do you still have that free goodie bag that came with all the, makeup and things? And, did you put it next to your nightstand? Or are you like looking at it every night because you're so proud of that free goodie bag? Have you held it there for 2 years? And no, of course not. Like we don't value something that we have for free. And so the investment is that transaction. And the sales part is the transaction of something actually holding the frequency and the vibration of something higher of who they are looking to lean into becoming.
I think some of this comes from the coach is, they're sort of misinterpreting what people are paying for. I think that's part of it, right? That they're paying for your knowledge somehow, or oh, here's the other one. I feel really bad charging people to be healthy. Like everyone should be able. It's like and I'm like, no, you're not paying. They're not paying you to be healthy, right? They're paying you to finally be successful for the first time, and they haven't been able to do that on their own. They're paying for your time, and it's an entire package of stuff that is so valuable because the end outcome is what they've been reaching for.
And you have to extract your self-worth from sales.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you look at the giant corporations out there, the Starbuckses, the McDonald's, and like McDonald's isn't feeling shame or guilt for upselling you for the would you like fries with that. Like
negotiate on the price of a quarter pounder.
They're not trying to negotiate on the price of a Big Mac. Like the price is the price, and they will always offer you an upsell or two. It's been ages and ages since I've been to a McDonald's, but the upsell is real in these, like, and it's taught. And so especially for the health like this is why I love the health coaching community, because like if you're competing, in essence, if we were to take this from, if we were going to go into the realm of like, let's pretend like competition exists. I don't personally believe it, but if you're competing as health coaches, like good-hearted, mission-minded health coaches competing against McDonald's from a financial perspective, McDonald's has no shame over, and this can be any fast food chain, but there's no shame around upselling to the Big Mac or the supersized drink. So if you are looking to increase people's health around the world, like upsell, do the upsells, like be able to know the value of what they're actually getting. They're getting the transformation, they're getting results, and it's not it's with you, but it's not from you, it's from their own work. And that's where us as coaches also have to disassociate ourselves from our clients' results. Is like we can take credit for guiding them to get some of those results, but ultimately it's I think that if we put our self-worth into whether our clients get results or not, that's when we create a codependent coaching relationship.
Mhm.
Versus if we own like our part in guiding and that we showed up 100% for our clients, and that even if our clients get results or if they delay in getting results, like I have some clients that I worked with several years ago who got some results in their business, but they struggled with some results in their relationships, and they were still like open and honest, because I keep in touch with most of my clients, is that they're still open and honest that, oh, this is still an area that I'm struggling with. And they're okay with struggling with it at this moment because they're not looking for that growth in that area. And that's okay. But I don't put my own self-worth as like, oh, I failed them as a coach because they're still having life happen to them. No, that's ridiculous. So being able to disassociate yourself from owning your part in how you showed up for your clients, and owning that you did the best you could with the resources, tools, and that you had available. And if your clients get amazing results, rock on. And if they're still struggling, like that's also looking at what they brought to the table. Did they show up fully present? Did they show up for their sessions? Like being able to disassociate our own identity from our clients' results is a huge part of coaching.
Yeah, big, huge, which a lot of coaches don't even clock because we think that we are in this helper or teacher role. Um, that's something that I do a lot of deprogramming on when I teach our advanced health coaching course. But I want to just kind of like wheel back a little bit because a couple of things you said that I thought were just worth highlighting. First of all, the price is the price. I've said that probably a million times. That's like the price is the price. Don't discount it for your friends. Don't offer a Valentine's Day special. Like I'm staunchly opposed to like discounting your price at all. Like charge more, ask for it, and when they
I
say,
am right there with you, Erin, on that one, especially if they're your friends.
yeah,
Like I I am staunchly opposed to accepting friends and family discounts. Like
yeah,
because I'm like, no, I value you and the services that you provide. And that's something that comes from that place of value. And you will get, I mean, when you're starting in any service-based profession, you will get hit up by people who are like, "Hey, can you just give me a tip?" or "Hey, can you do
yeah.
this?" And it will happen, and that comes down to owning your boundaries.
Well,
Mhm.
here's one for you. I had a photographer come and take some photos, not of me, but of well, my horses, honestly. And we got chit chatting, and she said, "Oh, you're a health coach. I'd love to hire you. Why don't we just trade services?" And I said, "No, why don't I just pay you and then you can pay me?" And although that seems kind of crazy on paper, it's like, well, either way, it's like there's something about that act of actually investing,
Mhm.
which I think is really crucial. And the price is the price. I don't discount it for anyone. Um, Now, another thing you said that I jumped on was this idea of competition, which I think is interesting. An interesting, it's one of the biggest imposter syndrome sound bites that people struggle with. And what's just as a little anecdote, we were talking about starting this new business, and it's in a completely different field. It's just going to be a little fun project, but I've been having imposter syndrome because it's new and I'm new in the space. And I've been writing down all of my imposter syndrome statements. I have a list of them here. So a lot of them are the market is already saturated, everybody else is already established. Um, all this competition language. But then I was working on reframing. Um, People are buying this service every day. Every day. Like these people have hundreds of clients. And there's, to your point, 7 billion people in the world. There's lots more people to buy this service. So there is a way to remind you. I think that this exercise of writing down my imposter syndrome feelings was really helpful in the retelling of the story, because the story now is a tangible thing that's on paper. And I can look at the word story and say, what's the flip side to this story? So it's been a really interesting exercise. So let's speak about competition. Do you have any useful words of advice for people who are entering a field that seems saturated? Because of course it does. It seems saturated because now you're in the health coaching world. And so now you're seeing health coaches. Like that's
Right.
Yeah.
the world that I'm entering now. I just entered this new realm and all I see now is them. It's like, oh
Right.
my God, everybody's doing
Social
this. That's
media
just
does for you.
activating system again, right?
Yep.
So what is your sort of words of wisdom around the market is saturated kind of stuff?
So saturation is exactly what you said it is. It's a belief. It's a story. And it's a story that so often we'll use to disempower ourselves of letting that story be our excuse, or instead, like you did with reframing your imposter syndrome of like, no, that's an asset. That means people are actually buying the services. That means
Right.
people are actually actively seeking someone to support them in that vein. And one thing that I do want to touch on imposter syndrome is every time I've seen imposter syndrome show up in clients, what I see is and in myself as well, is that means that they genuinely care about what they're doing.
Right.
They act like that means, because you don't get imposter syndrome about doing something that you don't really care about.
Right.
Like, so that if you look at the triggers of imposter syndrome or doubt or fear as being your teachers, it can lead you to what you genuinely value, and your values direct every decision that you will make as a leader. And so with the belief of like the market is saturated, yes, the market, that means people are buying, but that doesn't mean that everybody is buying from that same person. Like there could be somebody, and I've had this happen where I am, in a community, in someone else's community that's like far larger than mine, like way, way, way larger. And yet, and we teach kind of similar things, but because I'm there and offering a support in some different way, I've received clients because they resonate more with how I deliver what I deliver than somebody else. And that's the thing, is your background, your life experience, your training, everything. I have a self-worth exercise that I put all of my clients through when they first start working with me, that I want them to list everything with a numerical value of how much they've actually invested in themselves, whether that's their college degree or certifications or the amount of money they've spent on Amazon with book orders, because it's a lot for me.
Books.
Like that's a big one.
I didn't know
What? Oh yeah,
they
the
sell
book,
books.
they sell books. They sell so many books that suddenly just like many, many books. Like you should see the view that I have right now of our library. It's like it's all books. So Amazon card carrying book nerd right here. So like adding up that total. And also there are some experiences in your life, like growing up with an addict for a father, experiencing bulimia, struggling with all forms of different types of abuse as a child. Like those are things that you can't put a price tag to. And when I've had clients struggle with their parents' divorce or their own bankruptcy or their own like loss of a property or loss of a child, like these are intangible experiences that leave you forever changed, that allow you to serve a different type of person than someone else. And that is what I believe in conscious leadership, in crowning yourself, in really owning, to go back to ownership, owning all of your experiences and the worth of all of your experiences. Because there are some experiences that you can't put a numerical value to, but they have enriched and enhanced your life when you've learned the lessons that they've taught you. And like for me, I just recently lost my father. He died last year. And the experiences of grief, of navigating running a business while pregnant, losing my father, like that's something that grew me so much. I am forever changed based on the lessons of what I've learned from that experience. And so when you can look and maybe perhaps put a guesstimated rough numerical estimate on what that experience has taught you in terms of a financial turnaround, you may wind up with millions, even multi-millions of dollars of experience. Like most of my clients end up with at least 700,000 to 3 million. I think the highest I've ever gotten was $20 million of experience from life experience. And also, you can also add in, if you want to do this exercise, adding in how much you've earned in the past year ever since you started earning. And if you add that up, because all of that is experience in your business, in being if you weren't a business owner, if you were an employee, that's experience that you can then take into what would you like to have in your business as an employer. And so transmuting that experience into a financial dollar, when you look at that dollar amount, sometimes that can really surprise you. I mean, one of my clients who is having a little bit of imposter syndrome around charging $5,000 for a mastermind that she was hosting. And we tallied it up, and her life experience is just in a rough estimate that we did in literally 5 minutes was over $3 million. And I said, do you feel bad now about charging for $5,000 for a seat at your table in the mastermind? And she's like, oh, heck no. And she ended up literally within the next week making her first sale because she had the confidence in knowing the actual tangible numerical value of what her experience was.
Wow, that's a
How
cool
do you
idea.
help people figure that out? I mean, are you saying, okay, so I've invested X amount of dollars in this book, and this is what I gleaned from that, and X amount of dollars in my college education, and this is what I learned from that, relative to which I have always said personal experience trumps somebody else's education,
Yeah.
somebody else's mind, every single time. And what having that personal experience taught you, and to the depth that it taught you, adding a dollar. So I would love for you to take us kind of through that exercise, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of people going into this realm who maybe have a degree, but like in my case, it's an elementary education. It has nothing to do with health or fitness. I've taken certifications now, but when I first started, I had jack squat. I took one course, but I know what it's like to be a 40-year-old woman that has struggled with body image issues my entire life, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to shut up. I would love to hear you kind of how you walk a client through this. I can't even imagine how, like, when you really take a look at that, like, wow, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, you're more than what, like, I will walk you through literally step by step. I would be curious as to what your numbers are. So how much have you spent on certifications? And looking at your health coaching certification, if you've taken any supplemental certifications, if you've taken a Reiki workshop, just guesstimating. Like, this is not an exercise in perfection. This is a rough estimate, a rounding of a possibility. So let's look at certifications first. How much have you spent on your certification for the profession that you are currently in? Then look at the college education, master's degrees, PhDs that you have spent. Even if you're no longer in that field, there was a diligence, a discipline, a structure that you learned in order to that you is a skill set that you learned. Maybe it's the skill set of student leadership. Maybe it's a skill set of discipline. Maybe it's the skill set of, you got a paper due, and it's you pull an all-nighter to do it, because even though you don't do that all the time, you learn the skill set of when something's due, you get it done and you keep your commitments. That in and of itself is a skill set that you can get from traditional education. So those are all skill sets that you can learn. So even if you're not using your actual current degree, like, for example, one of my clients has a master's degree in counseling psychology. Well, she is not a counseling psychologist, nor does she practice that anywhere in her field of what she is doing now today. However, what she does do is customer relations on a daily basis. She's in sales. So she's using parts of her communication skill set that she gleaned from counseling psychology in order to influence and persuade her customers and clients to work with her. So there is a different, it's using the degree in a different way, but there are still skill sets that taught. So even if you're not applying the actual thing that the degree is for, still add that numerical value. How much did you spend on collegiate education, master's degrees, PhDs? How much have you made every year since you've been working in your actual experience? How much have you made dollar amount every single year since you've been working? So every single work experience adds up. So when my clients come from corporate and they want to start their own business, that if they've been doing $300,000 a year, typically they're accustomed to that energetic numerical standpoint of receiving that amount of money. They're comfortable with receiving that amount of money. So when my clients come to me to start their own business, I have no doubt that within 1 year I can get them to $300,000 and support them through that process, because they're already used to that space. I don't typically work with clients who come on board who have gone through being a student and who haven't made a significant amount of six figures in their business, simply because if they've gone from like being a smoothie worker into some sort like side hustling, they haven't yet gotten used to that energetic standpoint of what it's like to be earning $300,000, $500,000, $700,000 a year. There's a different energetic way of being, of way of showing up. And so that there is that piece. So take, for whatever experience you've had in any form of any business that you've ever worked in, how much did you make? Now, if you've had personal experiences, so personal experiences, like, yes, you can't necessarily put a price on your divorce or on a bankruptcy or on having a child. These are personal life-changing, or getting married. These are personal life-changing experiences that completely change your being. However, there is a financial amount. Like, I know that I did spend $6,000 for my midwife. So I can't necessarily add up all the diapers that I've purchased over the years of having two children, but there are those expenses as well. I mean, if you want to go detailed, I don't recommend taking hours and hours and hours to do this exercise. I typically give my clients 10 to 15 minutes just to get that estimate, to get that guidance as to where it is. So if you look at how much maybe you've spent on your last tax return, what were your expenses? Those are expenses of experience, especially if they go toward your child's education, your own education, buying diapers, buying food for your family. How much have you gone into investing in your personal self? So investing in your own self-care, massages, nail care, your own, buying organic produce, buying healthy foods. How much did you invest prior in your lack of self-care? Like, if you were eating crap food, how much were those investments of the lessons that came from those experiences of eating the chemically processed food? Like, what lessons did you learn from that? Look at those financial, just guesstimate what those financial numbers were on what you've spent. Then you can also look at those intangible life experiences. Like I said, having a child, going through divorce. Yes, there's somewhat of a numerical value. Add those up as well. Once you've added all of that up, look at how much life experience you have. I've never had a client that have it be less than $500,000.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine the older you get, the more life experience you have. And by the way, I would imagine too, folks that have put themselves out there before in another capacity and taken risks, have even a bigger, I mean, I just think what a great exercise to really think through. And this is interesting. It's interesting that you bring this up, because I talk to people a lot that are in a field, often sales, not always, but often sales, where they're making quite a bit of money and they need to be able to replicate that, right? In their heads, it's, I have to replicate that income, otherwise I can't leave. And my first question is, do you really? I mean, how much money do you really need to have? Maybe that's it. My question is, what life do you want to live? How much money is that going to cost you? That's going to be your number. Maybe it's more than you're making now. Maybe it's less. You don't know until you know your number. But I love the way you phrase that you're already familiar and comfortable with the energy that salary creates for you, and that you can get there. So I'm going to start using that. I mean, I just think, and for folks listening, that I know you're listening, that are like, I would love to be able to make this change, but financially I'm not going to be able to, because
Yeah.
You know,
I challenge that. Go ahead, Erin.
you know what else I liked about that exercise? Maybe this was like unintentional, but I was just thinking through it, is that it's two things. First of all, it goes to show that people invest money in their development, because you look at your $20 million you've spent and it's like, see, the money's out there.
Right.
And secondly, for a lot, okay, so a lot of the times in health coaching, it's a second career. It's like we're moving into this from something else. Not always. I'm sure we're seeing people as this industry grows that are going right into it from college or whatever. But for the most part at this stage, we're abandoning our other career to do this one. It's like, no, you're not abandoning. You're just layering this over top. You still have all of that experience. Like, I think there's some idea that we're starting completely from scratch. It's like, no, you have all this, right? So never mind the financial dollar value, which is a really cool exercise, but it's like, don't throw that away. Bring that with you into your new venture. It's all part of it.
Yeah, and looking at the skill set of what it allowed you to develop. Like, skill sets are, like, every human on the planet is born with the same skill set of being able to cry and poop themselves. Cry when they want food and poop themselves. Every other skill set is 100% learned. Everything. Now, is that not to say that some people are more naturally inclined to certain things? Yeah, I mean, I think people have a little bit more of a natural inclination, but that doesn't mean that those skill sets still aren't cultivated. Like my son is very good at math. He loves numbers. But that doesn't mean that if we weren't practicing flashcards on a regular basis, that he wouldn't that he wouldn't be able to do first grade math at 4, because if he wasn't practicing that skill set. Like, so that's a skill set that has to be learned and practiced. So yes, he may have a natural proclivity to that, but unless I'm fostering that development of like, okay, you're really good at this, let me give you, like, just like if your child is really good at writing, like, give them a pen and paper and encourage them to write. It's encouraging. And if you're really good, if you found that, for one example, one of my clients was previously in sales in her last business, and then she went off to start her own business, and she was working with a business partner who didn't really value her, and who said, like, he literally said at a dinner table meeting, he said, I don't really know what her skill set is, but she's really good and she ends up bringing in more money, just I don't know what she does so well. What she did so well was an intangible skill set of she naturally was gifted at building relationships. She just was a people person. She would go out of her way to serve people. She would go out of her way to offer help. And so naturally people wanted to do more business with her because that was her skill set. And that was something that she eventually ended up parting ways with that business partner because he didn't see her own value, and doing quite well on her own.
Cool.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, look, I mean, my degree is in elementary education. So I learned how to take complex topics and break it down into something simple. But professionally, I spent 25 years in finance. It has nothing to do with health or fitness, but again, very complicated topic that, first of all, people have a lot of emotion around, had to deal with that. It's highly nuanced as far as how markets move, had to learn to deal with that. I did a lot of public speaking in that job. It was a sales job. I was scared out of my wits the first time I actually had to sit down and try to sell something, but then I got through training, and the more I did it, the more comfortable I got with that. And the other thing, like, education teaches as well as kind of the realm I was in, because I wasn't like dealing with spreadsheets and dealing with numbers so much in finance. I was more the concepts person, right? And breaking things down in sales. So you learn how to communicate. That's something Erin is great at too, with her background in marketing and advertising. She's a natural gift for words, and being able to communicate things. And so this is what can move people forward in our type of business. And if you've got a different skill set, maybe your skill set is the numbers and really analytical. And that's going to be the kind of client you attract. The one who wants like the details and, all that stuff. And the two of you can go in a corner and just detail the hell out of each other and find success. Yep. But leaning into all of those skills and all of the things you've learned over time to differentiate yourself from an industry that appears to be saturated, which, by the way, health coaches, it's not saturated. All you need to do is talk to one sort of, I call them Gen Pop people that really aren't in our health and wellness world at all. There's far more of them than there are of us. We're not saturated.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. When you start talking to your potential clients, like people who aren't in your industry, who don't know what you know, because what happens is I think and this happens in any industry, when you start thinking that everyone's a part of your industry and that everyone knows what you know, and they don't. Like, so many people are completely deficient in understanding the language of their body, and in understanding what it's trying to communicate, and in connecting with their health. And there's so much information out there about health and about wellness. And why is there still a 72% overweight and obesity rate in America? Like, with that amount of information. So there are people that are actively seeking solutions. You're just surrounding yourself with the similar voices. So for me, what I do when I see, especially because if you are on Facebook, and if you're using Facebook as a sort of lead generation, and if you're promoting yourself as a health coach, and then you're getting the friend requests from other people who are health coach, and you're connecting with health coaches, Facebook and the algorithm will then start pushing the ads of other health coaches, just like I get the ads for other business coaches and other peak performance coaches and other high performance coaches. And suddenly it looks like everybody's in coaching. And that's not the case whatsoever. If you just go into a group that is different, like maybe a group that's a part of your community, if you go into a Facebook group with just like moms or something, you will find that there is there is a small amount of people that are actually in your industry, and that so many people don't know what they don't know, and they don't know that they don't know it until they have someone like you to guide them. It's just about you finding what is a blue ocean for you instead of a red ocean. And if you don't understand that metaphor, a red ocean is where it's swimming with the quote unquote sharks of your competition versus the place that is blue and full of beautiful fishies for you to munch on.
So true. Think about it. Like people are like, oh, this person friended me and this person's following me. But then and so you thinking your universe is actually growing when in actuality, it's just becoming more homogeneous, right?
Yeah,
it's larger, but it's really not more diverse. It's not, so you're just attracting other coaches when you speak that way. We talk about this all the time too, Erin, right? About our messaging and the kind of things we talk about. The average health consumer doesn't really run around using the terms gut inflammation or whatever. Like they don't talk like that. But the more you talk like that, the more you're going to attract other coaches that talk like that. You've got to.
We're like, oh my gosh, you're so on my wavelength with talking about gut inflammation. It's my favorite thing ever. Not gut inflammation.
Like if you're out there talking about how you have to, Mark Sisson talks about this, how he would plot his training route around where he knew there were bathrooms, because of the problems he had with his digestion. I don't think he'd be embarrassed if he knew it. He says that all the time in public, but a message like that is like, oh my God, he totally knows what he needs. That I'm always thinking about where's the next rest stop or whatever the case may be. And I would love to not have to think about that. And the person who can help me with that problem is the person I'm going to work with. Speaking in those terms. So I just love it. And what a great out of the box way to try to really calculate your value and go from what do I have to bring to the table to holy shit, I got a lot to offer,
Got a lot to offer. Yeah. And every single person has their own authentic, unique perspective and way of looking, even if you're talking about something that other health coaches talk about, like gut inflammation. You have your own unique background, your own story around why that you're so passionate about that thing and why that is so important to you on helping others with that thing. And that is the power of your own story and owning all of it.
Speaking of calculating, you twigged something for me. So 88% of the US population is metabolically unhealthy. Okay. So there's 329.5 million people in the US, 88% of them. So 289 million people have metabolic syndrome. Okay. Let's say 1% of them is your target audience, whatever that is. So 1% of those people, that's 2.8 million people. Let's say 1% of those people gets their eyeballs on your stuff. That's 28,000 people. Let's say 1% of the people who put their eyeballs on your stuff are interested in working with you. Well, there's 289 people out there just waiting for you to do it. Like that's 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of the sick people in the United States. Like the market is not saturated. I just wanted to do that math. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you for making that crystal clear.
Erin, I love that you did that because I'm not a numbers and spreadsheet kind of gal, but when you can break something down into the numbers where I'm like, I like that, those numbers are so simple. Like, can you attract, can you communicate, and can you also tell the story to your subconscious mind that there are 289 people who are desperately looking to find you?
Yeah. And like 289 people, I don't know if that doesn't sound like a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of clients. That's more than you'll be able to handle.
Yeah. And so like if the average cost of a program is $2,000 and you have 200, that's a $500,000. That's over $500,000 a year for your business.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, they're out there. Like I just feel like this, we kind of started talking about this whole, where do I find clients, which is the question we get asked, number one, probably the number one question on the hearts and minds of our listeners. And the answer is they're completely out there. What I've learned from you is that start believing that they're out there and trusting and knowing that they're out there, because as long as you go through life believing they're not out there, yeah, you're gonna create that reality for yourself, unfortunately.
Yep.
Yeah, and if once you know that they're out there, once you know that you have those 289 people, where are they hanging out? Are they listening to the podcasts, or are they catching live streams? Are they on Facebook? Are they on LinkedIn? If you have just one, like that one person, that one client can give you just enough data to kind of give you some ideas to where you can steer your marketing to. Like for me, I found out that most of my clients are listening to podcasts. And so that's why I go on a lot of podcasts. And I love going on podcasts because I get to have amazing conversations. And that's that that's where I learned that, from the data showing me that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you call yourself, you're a high performance coach, right? So
Mhm.
what is your typical client? I mean, it sounds to me like you work with a diverse group from a profession point of view,
Yeah.
but what type of person hires you, I guess? What are they looking for?
So I market to psychography, not demographics. Typically, my clients are Gen Xers who are in the second sort of build stage of building their next business, or they've built something before, or they've had success in a past corporate career, and they're looking to start something new or find that business that really fuels their soul. And they're looking to have that, they have too many ideas. They have lack of team support and struggle with releasing control and with managing boundaries, product and productivity. And so I work with a lot of the visionary leaders of these in the formative stages of their companies, doing anywhere from 150,000 to 2 million. And in how do they navigate building that team structure, surrendering control? What are the stories that they have around hiring, firing, letting people go? What are the stories that they have around their own ability to lead? What are the stories that they have around their skill set? And how do they show up authentically and start standing out in the way that they want to be the queen or king of their own life? And how do they serve? I mean, my clients are they have the best hearts. Like, they really do. They have this massive heart for so much more impact. And income is nice, and of course they want to make it, and of course they want to maintain or grow into a greater standard of living. But beyond that is the impact that they want to make with their career or their additional philanthropic endeavors.
Well, cool. We have lots of those listening for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, the Gen X are I mean, from a standpoint of people listening, and what a great demographic. I mean, there are so many Gen Xers, I think, that, as the generation behind the boomer, where we were kind of raised to, get a job
Mm.
and support our, we have this tremendous sense of, I guess, obligation, right? That we really don't spend a whole lot of time really thinking about what we really want. My
Mhm.
son's generation, my kids are like the polar opposite, you know?
Are they
So,
millennials?
and I want, yes, the millennials. So now I'm thinking it's all these Gen Xers that are just sour, that they feel like they have to do everything. They don't want to see their kids go down this rabbit hole, but I mean, what a great demographic to focus on. And by the way, these people are, I guess, more seasoned in their careers. They likely have the free cash flow to hire somebody like you, health coaches listening, right? That's the other thing, is you gotta work with people that can afford your services. As much as you might want to be able to give it all away, let's be successful first so you can afford to give stuff away, right? So that
Yeah.
you can afford to be philanthropic and all
Yeah,
that.
once you hit your own freedom metric of whatever that monthly is for you that you feel comfortable with, then go forth and create the lower tier $20 programs, the $8 ebooks and things like that. But I will tell you this from a business standpoint, like for my private coaching services, I tested a program that I was running, and I tested it for 5-figure entrepreneurs. And that I took the exact same curriculum that I give my 6 and 7-figure entrepreneurs, and I gave it to my 5-figure entrepreneurs with similar availability. And with all my private clients, I give 24/7 Voxer support, so they can message me at any time if they're struggling with a negotiation or a business development deal, or something goes off with their kids and they're struggling with the communication in that. I can kind of coach them through. And very rarely do my $50,000 and $60,000 a year clients take me up on that. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they just kind of are they're doing their thing. And I found that actually the lower the price point, the more the client demand was. And the same is true for when I've done lower tier membership groups and things. And that's not just for my business. I've heard that across the board with multiple different businesses. Those $8 ebooks or $4 ebooks, you will have people emailing you like, I don't know how to open it. Where do I get it? I just paid this. Because for those people, sometimes spending that $8 or that $22 a month, that's a significant investment for them for where they are in that stage. And so if you're looking to build your business, start with the higher ticket first, even if the higher ticket makes you feel uncomfortable. Start with the higher ticket first, so then you can hit that freedom metric, so that then you can serve the people who you also want to reach, so that you can think from that business perspective and from that financial perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I'm wrapping us up here because I think we could just keep talking, and we have places to be. Just tons to learn from you, lots of actionable takeaways. And what I heard you say at the beginning is that what you see consistently that gets in the way of success and growth is mindset. And we talked a lot around it today. So folks who are looking to work on their mindsets and maybe want to hook up with you, where can they find you?
You can just go to crownyourself.com. If you love this conversation and you think you'd like to have a conversation as to how I could support you in developing your mindset as a leader and to grow your business and build your empire, then just go to crownyourself.com and click the button that says work with me. And I'd love to have a conversation with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was so fun. I learned a lot.
Thank you so much, Laura and Aaron. It has been such a pleasure. And you two are, when what you're building and how you're supporting health coaches, like that just makes my heart sing, because I so deeply want, it is my greatest mission to see more mission-minded, heart-centered, service-driven leaders making more money, because that is how I truly believe that we can transform this world to a healthier, happier, wealthier world.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.